Greetings, my dear friends. Welcome in. Glad to see you. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're going to do a review and walkthrough of an RPG module that I don't think gets anywhere near the amount of love that it deserves, and that is Fires of Dis. Written for the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition Planescape setting, this is an awesome adventure. If you've never heard of or played in the Planescape setting, this adventure is exactly what the Planescape setting was made for, to take players into fantastical realms beyond their normal, Earth-like worlds and confront them with beings of cosmic magnitude, and where the power of belief might be the solution to your problems and change the multiverse itself. To set the mood, let's see how the thing sold itself. In the outer planes, a holy sword can be a fiend's best friend, especially when the owner wants it back. Sneaking into the second layer of Foul Baator isn't easy, but with a little help from the right high-up men, it can be done. Of course, exactly who the right high-up men are can give a basher pause, so it's often best not to ask. But there's a sword to be found and blood's needed to find it. Truth is, those who don't end up lost are sure to find out that no good deed goes unpunished. Fires of Dis is a Planescape adventure for 4 to 6 characters of 5th to 9th levels. From Sigil, the City of Doors, the heroes plunge headfirst into a dangerous journey across the outer planes. Their quest for a stolen sword leads them to the hostile gate town of Ribcage, the treacherous plain of Baator, and the disciplined Burg of Fortitude, a gate town teetering between two planes, just waiting for something to tip the scales. Your player characters need wits as keen as their steel to brave the fires of Dis and survive. For those not familiar with it, the term Baator is the name given to the 9 Hells in the AD&D 2nd Edition because TSR in those days was dealing with the backlash of the Satanic Panic, and so they did what they could to massage out the names Hell and Demons and Devils and went with different terms for the same thing. And frankly, the term Baator grew on me. So I'm going to refer to that outer plane interchangeably as Baator and the 9 Hells throughout this review. And the challenges are big and the module plays to that. The dangers come from hell itself and from the evil gods in it. So these aren't just bigger bags of hit points we're talking about that you need to knock down. We're talking about some of the most powerful evil entities in all of creation. And that player character level isn't that high. Players need wits. The threats are real and death is definitely on the table, as is damnation. So before we get into the module itself, let's see who we have to thank or curse for writing this thing. First published in 1995 by original D&D publisher TSR, Fires of Dis had some incredible talent involved in writing it. Taking a look at the credits block, this is probably the biggest one I've seen in an older module. To get this out of the way, since I normally pick apart spelling errors, bad editing, logic gaps, and ridiculous assumptions made by modules, this review won't feature much of that. It was well edited, it makes sense, and they did the work and did it right. We're going to focus on only a few of the key figures involved in its creation, starting with the designers. Here we have 2 designers, which sometimes gives me pause, but here it worked out. The first to be mentioned is the late, and I say great, Steve Perrin. The initial designer on the module was a prodigious creator in the RPG hobby, and his list of credits is far too long to go through here. His drive-through RPG credits go to 101. His list of credits on RPG Geek goes for 14 pages. Perrin earned a Bachelor of Arts in English from San Francisco State University, was a founding member of the Society for Creative Anachronism. You know, the people that you might find in a park beating each other with Nerf sticks while wearing armor and saying "milady" a lot. Yeah, those people. And is perhaps known best for creating the RPG RuneQuest in 1978. He wrote works for Thieves' World, Call of Cthulhu, and other Chaosium RPGs for decades. And when his unfortunate demise came, the announcement came from Chaosium. So close was their relationship. His earliest work was for Dungeons & Dragons, though, with his 1976 set of custom rules for D&D combat called the Perrin Conventions, and Chaosium's D&D Monster Collection series called All the World's Monsters, whose first volume did squeak out before the original Monster Manual. He helped Ed Greenwood brainstorm a lot of early Forgotten Realms material and either co-designed or wrote these titles: 0th level adventure module under Illifarn, setting book Dreams of the Red Wizards, The Magister, Hall of Heroes, Lords of Darkness, and more. He co-wrote the excellent Beckme module Legacy of Blood. Besides rampant freelance work for TSR, FASA, Hero Games, West End Games, and Iron Crown Enterprises, he worked with video game developers Interplay, Maxis, and Spectrum Holobyte, doing game design, playtesting, and writing manuals for such computer games as Mechanized Assault and Exploration, Star Trek Starfleet Academy, and Descent to Undermountain. Best I can tell, his was a nerd life well lived. The quality of the module we're reviewing today speaks well of his work because he covers all the bases, from interesting locations and exciting challenges players must face, logical story flow, guidance for DMs, and succinct suggestions on how to expand on the material presented. It takes a designer of experience and skill to do all that well. He wasn't alone though. Best I can tell, Steve did the first draft, but TSR later decided to change the format from what he was asked to do into something else, and they brought in Ray Valise for additional design and to edit it. I think he did a good job too. I had not heard of Ray Valise before, but I should have. The man has credits as a frequent Dragon magazine contributor, design credits on this module, along with Planescape modules and setting books Something Wild, Uncaged Faces of Sigil, Faction War, and maybe my favorite write-up of D&D Gods in On Hallowed Ground. He contributed to Ravenloft Adventures Circle of Darkness, designed for whatever Trudvang Chronicles are, some Numenera, some Pathfinder Mythic Adventures, and more, but nothing in a while. He also published a book on editing RPGs, which I read and was pretty good, called Writing with Style, an editor's advice for RPG writers. I don't know if he has also passed, but none of his social media accounts are active and his website is defunct. If you happen to see this, Ray, drop a comment and say hi. You've got a fan. For art, we don't get a ton of it. Some of it is recycled Tony DeTurlizzi from other Planescape sources, and it's very much a best of times, worst of times situation. Dana Knutson did the interior version of the cover art, which isn't bad, but then somebody killed my boy in the cover version. This is awful. There's a saying that cover art can sell a module, and I know plenty of people have bought modules because the cover was too cool. In many of those cases, the cover was better than the module inside. But this, I have to wonder how many people did not buy this module because of this eyesore. This is terrible. And frankly, it makes hell look retarded. Scott Burdick looks to have done this piece of an angel being surrounded by the dregs of hell, and it's a worthy scene. The darker colors in the foreground figure seem a bit muddy to me, and I'd have preferred a little more light there. The other pieces I can't put an artist's name to, but they're pretty good, especially this one depicting Dispater, the Archduke of the second layer of Baator, who I think is inspired by movie star and sex tiger Telly Savalas. The disdain on the Devil Lord's face is palpable. Just my speculation, the relatively low amount of art probably had to do with too much adventure and too few pages. This thing clocks in at 64 pages, double the previous Planescape module's page count of 32, but as you'll see, even 64 pages was not enough to hold all this module's ambitions. The maps by Rob Lazzaretti are impressive, and there's plenty of them. The Wikipedia entry for Rob was good, and reported that as a wee lad, he was inspired to become an artist by the imagery of Call of Cthulhu. So I have my concerns about his mental health. He studied at Illinois State University, interned with Game Designers Workshop for a year, making maps for RPGs Traveler, Dark Conspiracy, Twilight 2000, and Dangerous Journeys, and allegedly because nobody else liked drawing them. But his cartography work led TSR to hire him in 1993 and throw him right into working on Planescape and big, beautiful, poster-sized maps. When Wizards of the Coast took over, he became art director of cartography for all their RPGs, and he claimed particular pride in his work on the Alternity game's Dark Matter setting. He has also worked with Green Ronin and Paizo, but these days he has both an archived and a dead website, so I couldn't find much on what he's up to. Speaking of art and maps, the original hard copy publication included this neat DM screen, which has the cover art piece on the front and maps of the 2 gate towns in the adventure. The interior is festooned with tactical maps and maps of DMI's only sensitive locations. The maps are good, have helpful legends and scales where appropriate, but I will ding them over lack of consistent compass placement. Only one map has a compass. While I can see the justification for not using cardinal directions in the outer planes where space and direction are not always reliable, but how's the DM supposed to describe directions to their players? Sure, north, south, east, and west are peculiar to prime material planets with magnetic norths that make them meaningful, but including directions here as a quality of life feature for the poor sap trying to run it would have been nice. Now that we've talked about the parts that won't ruin the story, from here on there will be spoilers aplenty. It's a friggin' walkthrough. We're going to look at a bunch of this thing. So proceed with that caveat. With that warning out of the way, this is an adventure that plays to the Planescape setting's strengths. Exploration of strange, planar locations, planar characters, and doing things you don't get to do elsewhere. The planes operate by their own rules, and they are different than our own, making them exciting and dangerous places ideal for adventurers. I said this thing was ambitious, so allow me to give as succinct a summary as I can give. This adventure starts in Sigil, the city at the center of the outer planes and maybe the entire multiverse, then sends the party through a town built around a gate to Baator, the Nine Hells, maybe the worst place in all of existence. The party must traverse Avernus, the first layer, descend to the second layer of Dis by passing through Tiamat's lair, journey across Dis to Dissipator's Iron City, negotiate your way through the mind-bending power of the Archduke's security measures, of which he has plenty, he's possibly the most paranoid entity in the multiverse, enter Dissipator's Iron Tower, work through rooms that don't connect to each other using infernal flower power, meet the Archduke himself. You get to meet a damned Archduke of Hell in this adventure, and my favorite one at that, and he is just as interesting as I had hoped for. After all that, you take the MacGuffin you're sent to find to the gate town, trying to physically join with the lawful good plane of Arcadia, and the party's actions allow the Archduke's plot to spring into action, and possibly ruin that from happening because he's a dick like that. But they have the chance to redeem themselves and make the multiverse a slightly better place. If that sounds like a lot, it's because it is. And I find it as impressive as it is ambitious. Now let's see how it does all that. We get started with a good introduction, adventure overview, and guidance on how to run it here and more throughout each chapter. The chapter by chapter summary is fantastic. And frankly, all modules should have this to help the DM mentally map how all the parts connect. Heck, the table of contents even does this, making it easy to remember where to look when searching for information. This module gives us dungeon exploration, social challenges, and overland travel with planar twists. And I say dungeon exploration and not dungeon crawling because you're not intended to kill and loot everything. One blog I read criticized the Tiamat section for having too many overpowered enemies. You're adventuring in hell through the lair of the alpha evil dragon goddess. Did you think this was going to be easy? Did you think this was going to be a good time? Most of the module takes place in the Nine Hells. And guess what? Hell is an awful place to be, and the module is written to reflect that. It says Fires of Dis on the cover. How could this have been a surprise? And in this chapter, the designers provide solid scaling advice for the adventure to handle parties both above or below the intended 4 to 6 player characters of levels 5 through 9. As well as how to read the module, how to think about it, and different tactics and techniques on how to handle the monsters in it in relation to the characters. We get short write-ups of the Planescape factions that are involved, and this one page reminds me of how many friggin' philosopher gangs the setting has. Now, for more information on the Planescape factions, see these Jorfton videos. He did a really good job covering a lot of material. And while using factions can deepen immersion in the setting by providing umpteen hooks for helping your players get involved, this adventure is perfectly runnable even if you know nothing about them. All you have to do is treat the faction NPCs that show up as standalone groups and you'll be fine. Next are stats for the most important recurring NPCs in the adventure. There's Daniil, the Paladin, a very high-level champion of good, paragon of the powers of Arcadia, and the poor sap who just gets wrecked in this thing. There's 2 guides the party can hire to escort them to Dissipator's Iron Tower, a tiefling doom girl devil worshipper who only serves the party if they pretend to also be into worshiping Badazu. Badazu is a 2nd edition term for devils. Badazu live in Baator. Or a Githzerai thief dude who will be glad to guide you, but don't ask him to get in any fights. And the pit fiend Kriik, who is both Dissipator's fixer in the plot and also low-key looking to betray him. which Dissipator both knows and is totally into. For reviewing the adventure itself, the line-by-line intricacies quickly become so complicated that I can't do my typical nitpicking review. This will be more akin to my Day of Al Akbar review, with us covering the basic flow of the module with stops to highlight the parts that I think you'll find most interesting. The extra material is good if you're trying to run it though, because there are so many options presented for how things can go, what players might do, and how the DM can handle it. These conditionals are usually sensible, and with just a little bit of work at each location along the way, the DM could make this into a big campaign with a massive amount of playtime. Chapter 1, The Sting, starts with the DM sending the party on a shopping trip, where they get marked by a powerful devil in disguise as useful idiots to rope into the plot. With his patsies identified, he runs up, uses the bump method to pickpocket something important to a PC, and make sure they see him run away. Why? Because he wants to lure them to a certain alley so they can witness his partner devils jumping the NPC we just mentioned, Daniil the Paladin. Whatever the PCs do, the biggest devil steals Daniil's prized Holy Avenger sword by yoinking his arm clean off. The whole thing! He rips his arm off and teleports away. That's the opening scene. So let that set the mood, which is perfect for one of my games, really. Before he leaves, old Arm Ripper makes sure to say, "Time to go, boys. We've got Dissipator's prize." So his marks have a trail to follow because he wants that. A short time later, Daniil's faction friends, the Harmonium, lassos the party into getting the sword back because their ascension ritual to move that city of fortitude into Arcadia needs it to work. So why does this faction with a bunch of members across multiple planes need the party to retrieve it for them? Well, because they sent a raiding party to Baator to get it back, and they got wrecked. Since violence didn't work, the Harmonium suggests the party use the proper channels to enter Baator and to chase the sword down there, since they have a name of someone who might have it. The Harmonium suggests the party start by securing permission to enter and safe passage through Baator by entering via the gate town called Ribcage. Each outer plane has a gate town that is essentially the visitor center for the plane, so Ribcage is the best bet on getting into the Nine Hells and surviving. The module advises that player characters may try to find their own way into Baator and not go through Ribcage, which will be a more challenging route. Possible, sure, but the few safeguards Ribcage can provide for them on a journey through hell will not be available to them. This chapter has more text if you want to involve faction politics, and we get a set of optional encounters we can use, which we also get in every chapter. They're generally neat and I dig them. Strangely, at the end of chapter 1, we get 2 more ideas on how to hook the party into the adventure, which clearly should have come earlier. Chapter 2, Under the Ribs, sees the party arrive at Ribcage. When the player characters arrive at the veil of the spine that holds Ribcage, this is the flavor text they get. You find yourself standing, somewhat uncertainly, on slanted rocky ground. The rock slopes upward before you to form a hill. No, a mountain. In fact, all around you are giant pointed peaks of stone that shoot upwards into the sky, towering above you like monstrous fangs. There don't seem to be any flat paths to follow. At about 100 yards to your left, you spy a collection of mountains that look odd, facing ridges of long, slender peaks that curve up and inward, like bony fingers or ribs. The faint buzz of civilization seems to come from beneath the peaks. The Ribcage is tucked within those curving peaks, and the residents have blocked off gaps in the mountains with a 20-foot tall iron wall. But the PCs will find a towered gate near the end of the valley. That's the Spire Gate. Inside those walls, the blood-red stone roads of Ribcage are clean and straight, usually meeting at right angles to form orderly blocks of dwellings, alehouses, and markets. Most of the buildings look cold and hostile, made of gray or black stone. However, there's little greenery or vegetation of any kind. Instead, the burg's crammed with towers and keeps, and packs of soldiers in black and gold meander in the streets. Maybe to end trouble, maybe to start it. But everywhere you go, those huge curved peaks looming over the whole town make you feel like a beetle crawling in a colossal skeleton. Now, getting in requires the party paying 10 gold each to the gate guards, which opens the gate and scores each PC a pass to prove they have permission to be in there. Because there's people hanging from ropes on the walls who ran afoul of the law, so it's a bad deal if you don't have permission to be in here. Plenty of text is devoted to handling players being jerks and trying to fight their way in, because there's a breed of gamer that tries to fight every NPC no matter what, no matter how bad they'll make it for themselves. It was such a problem that I have now read several modules from back in the day where significant amounts of text and guidance is given to the DM on how to handle players trying to ruin everything in the adventure. Innocent NPCs, here's how you can try to get the players to not kill them. The quest giver themselves, here's ways to keep those douchebags from ruining him before he can get the adventure out. So if some of the older modules come across as heavy-handed in that regard, there was a reason they were written that way. This town is full of amoral and immoral paranoids. Because of course it is. It's a city built around a portal to hell. What did you expect? Nice, carefree candy elementals? Once inside the walls, the party has a portal to find and enter, which isn't simple. The gate is held under lock and key by the lord of the city, Baron Parax, a powerful fighter wizard tiefling who plays Ribcage's 5 powerful families against each other to maintain power. And he hates the devils with a passion. Why? Because he's nobody's bitch. And he knows what happened to the last gate town to hell. They want to drag him and his city into the inferno, ruining his power base, and no doubt making him regret ever being born. Now, I mentioned tieflings a couple times. In 2nd ed, tieflings weren't all carbon copies of the stereotypical devil. No. Tiefling could have been from any outer planar race, crossed with a mortal. They did not have to have horns and tails and look like fiends straight out of the 9th layer of Baator. They were just plain touched. There was something a little bit off about them, and you could customize your character however you wanted to. They could be freakish, or they could just be a little uncanny valley-ish. There was room for creativity, unlike now, where everybody's the spawn of Asmodeus. Ribcage is also where the party can acquire a cover story to smooth their way into and around Baator, pick up one of the guides we mentioned to get them to Dissipator's Iron Tower, and a merchant side quest they can do along the way for sake of variety. The key to getting what you want here and around Baator itself? Bribes. Big, beautiful, illicit, ubiquitous bribes. One place I want to stop off and tell you about is under this section called Dark Secrets. The party might get the idea to head for the Shrine of Dark Secrets. And what's that? It's a temple open to any idiot eager to worship the powers of Baator or the lords of the 9 hells themselves. 10-foot-tall statues of pit fiends with wings unfurled and arms outstretched stand guard on either side of the entrance. The statues are frightening, but nothing more. Here's a flavor text. As you enter, the sudden darkness envelops and blinds you until your eyes adjust to the dim candlelight. The room is spacious and high-ceilinged, with rows of benches facing a plain but colossal altar, and small doorways running the length of the room on both sides. A few of the devout sit scattered through the benches, and 2 men in white robes rub the tall sides of the altar with cloth. The doors along each wall open into small rooms, where adherents of Baator can privately flagellate themselves in the name of the powers they worship. While the PCs are in the temple, various Berks go in and out of the rooms, and cries of pain and joy issue from within. So yes, this is a temple dedicated to the worship of hell itself. And strangely enough, this is where you can pick up one of the guides. You may have pondered this earlier. Why does the party need to go through Ribcage and through Avernus to get to Dis? Why can't they just find a portal straight to Dis and avoid a lot of trouble, like coming to a temple where people are scourging themselves in praise to the devils? Well, I'm glad I asked. Baator is a prison and doesn't allow easy access to all its layers. If you want to go lower than the first layer of Avernus, you need to know a special path, have powerful magics that'll get you in, or go through the monstrous guardian of the way down, Tiamat. So the gate in Ribcage is one of the few known ways to get in, and it's probably the most civilized way to get in because you can negotiate with the devils or the representatives here to try to get safe passage through one of the worst places in the multiverse. The gate is inside the Baron's Citadel, and there's several ways to get in there to the Baron and to the gate, but only really one way to the gate, through the Baron. How the party gains audience with the Baron and the reason they give for wanting to enter Baator changes his price and opinion of them. For example, his standard fee to use the portal is 1,000 gold pieces. But if the PC secured one of the guides, he can be haggled down to free for in-game reasons. If the PCs say they want to give Dissipator the finger by getting the sword back, he loves it, gives them a fat discount, and plans to ambush them if they come back his way so he can take the Holy Avenger for himself. Because evil is treacherous. That's what it does. Betray. Entering the gate sends us to Chapter 3, Red Journey. The PCs are plopped into the red-skied, blasted, literal hellscape of violence and the blood war of Avernus. This chapter does a great job capturing that mood and impressing on the players how awful it is. Exiting the portal, the party arrives in the ruins of Darkspine, a desolate shell of the previous gate town that was pulled into Baator. Fortitude is trying to go up. Well, you can also get pulled down. Few of the original inhabitants survive in a living hell of desperation and terror. They would do anything to get out because, damaged as they are, they still know anywhere is better than here. Ideas are offered to the DM should they want to do more with the destroyed town. And I love the misery and agony extended play here could reap. Now, let me give you some of the flavor text from A View of the Wasteland. Avernus, the first of the 9 layers of Baator, is little more than an empty, blasted plain, so the PCs won't be able to see much from the ground level of Darkspine. If a body flies, levitates, or climbs atop a building that hasn't yet crumbled, he'll get a better view of the surroundings, such as they are. Beyond the shattered town lies rocky wasteland, stretching out endlessly in all directions to the horizon, where it meets the spotless, blood-red sky. Far off in the distance, you can make out another cluster of buildings, though it's impossible to judge whether the journey would take a few hours, a few days, or a few months. The air is lit by fireballs twice the size of a human head that careen across the landscape, ducking and rising before exploding like flaming flowers. Those bursts are the only sounds you can hear, apart from the occasional screams that seem to ring across the entire plain. And these are some problems that you're going to run across when trying to traverse Avernus to get to the gate down to the second layer disc. 2 consistent dangers that are pointed out are the rocks of the landscape and the fireballs we just mentioned. For the rocks, sharp stones of obsidian and quartz litter the layer, making travel on foot difficult. So this is effectively difficult terrain, and if you try to run, you're going to have to make dex checks to see if you fall, and if you do, you take legit damage. Now the fireballs, every 10 minutes, there's a 10% chance that one explodes near your group. And if the DM wants to make them more dangerous, there's rules for how to do that. And since the purpose of being in Avernus is to get to the gate to Dis, and most of Avernus is a wasteland, the trip is tricky with a guide and nearly impossible without one. So this is where getting one of those guides is a very important thing. But the route is going to take you from Darkspine across this horrid wasteland, the river Styx, a thing called the Maggot Pit, and Tiamat's lair where the gate to Dis is found. If they or their guide knows where they're going, they're going to pass a string of ruined previous gate towns along the way. And then they get to the river Styx, which is its own problem because if you fall in, well, there goes your memory, and you just might drown in it. Also, time and distance are kind of unreliable here. You have to mentally focus on where you're trying to get, or else you're just going to get lost in every sense of the word. If you run out of food and die, well, guess what? You get to stay here forever. The sky never gets any darker or lighter. There's no sun or stars. The only way that you can measure time is by how often you get hungry, how often you're exhausted and need to sleep. And so keeping track of time as a resource, especially for spellcasters, is important and not something you should take for granted. The only thing edible here would be this fire fungus. It's the only thing that a non-Batazu here can survive on. It's a warm, wriggling, dull red growth usually found in patches recently hit by fireballs, which means it's all over the place. And it doesn't taste good, but it will keep you alive. And there's some neat things along the way as the players go down the road of good intent. There's the previous ruined gate towns where the DM is free to expand on encounters with survivors and other things that have moved in. There's the Pillar of Skulls, a grotesque tower made of hundreds of living, disembodied heads all squashed together to form a solid mass at least 10 feet around and 20 feet tall. And it gibbers non-stop. And the heads are rotting, by the way, so this isn't a pleasant encounter by any stretch of the imagination. There's the River of Blood, which you smell before you see. It's a slow river of warm, partially clotted blood streaming down through the wasteland. Its slippery, scabby banks pulling in any berk who comes too near, and you have to make a dex check to not get pulled under. If you decide to follow it to its headwaters, it's the Lake of Blood, which is just as nasty as what you might imagine. And then we get some encounters that can happen, and the wandering monster encounters is pretty common. It's hell. It's a bad place to be. So we get both rando creature encounters, but we also get set piece encounters that the DM can place in anywhere they want. Bel's Legion, because the Pit Fiend Bel is the head general of Avernus and has an immense army of Badazu to fight in the Blood War. A large dust cloud appears on the horizon, and the low rumbling thunder makes you thirsty for rain. But this is a different kind of storm. A huge black mass emerges from the haze, streaming into thousands of distinct shapes. A scrabbling horde of Badazu. Seething masses of melted lemurs and blobby Nuperibos spill forward from the front ranks, spurred on by jeering gargoyle-like Abishai. Toward the rear, army banners are hoisted by an honor guard of Barbazu that surround a monstrous pit fiend. Overhead flies a small squadron of a dozen or so black Abishai. Abishai are basically dragon devils. Yeah, because a regular devil's not bad enough. So the way to survive this is for the PCs to somehow conceal themselves, and it's unlikely they'll be attacked or even noticed if they make the effort. If they don't, things are going to be bad. And there's the Hunters. It's a Amnazu, which is quite the powerful devil, leading on 4 Yeth hounds, each of which is awful, and he comes after the PCs. The sudden chilling howls seem to tear your spine from your body. A bang unlike any you've heard before. Silhouetted against the crimson sky are 4 feral wolf-like shapes, twice the size of ordinary prime wolves, wingless but still somehow slicing through the air. Spotting your group, the hounds land and gallop toward you, gnashing and growling. Close behind them follows a short, stubby, winged fiend, gleefully driving the pack with manic shouts and gestures. So the Yethhounds are going to attack regardless, but if the PCs are able to defeat them, which isn't an easy thing to do, the Amnazu can be bribed to leave them alone, and that would actually be a good idea for the party. He is not an easy customer. There's the Ocelith Patrol, or Bone Devils in 5th edition terms, the police force of Baator, with their own battle devils at their disposal. If the PCs have a pass, they're going to get roughed up, but they'll be allowed to go on their way. Now, if they don't have a pass, the Oceliths don't accept bribes, and things can go very poorly. There's Lost Petitioners. A petitioner is the soul of someone who went to the outer planes after they died, and the soul goes to the outer plane either of the god they worshipped or the alignment they're associated with. So if you're lawful evil or worshipped a lawful evil god, chances are you're coming here, which is not a good place to be. And these petitioners are not happy about it, and they're lost. There's the Fiend Herders. So it's possible that your party will get stampeded by a horde of the weakest of devils that are being driven into an army collection point for the Blood War. And more encounters. But we're going to skip ahead to the Maggot Pit, a Badazu breeding ground that blocks the entrance to Tiamat's lair. From a distance, the lair appears to be a small rock formation, but up close, it seems infinitely large. The crater in front of you is easily 1,000 feet across and many thousands of feet wide, filled to the lip with a writhing mass of ooze and maggots. As you watch, fresh lemurs and Nuperibos emerge from the goo and crawl onto the land, stumbling around blindly, seemingly oblivious to your presence. This is the birthplace of the lowest rungs of devil kind. These are tortured souls being formed into devils. The pit abuts a sheer rock wall that stretches across the plain and rises into the sky as far as you can see. A single large mouth at the base of the wall opens into darkness within. Suddenly, a hulking Abishai bursts from the writhing soup, scattering clumps of putrid goo in his wake. "Hands off my pit!" He flies over and lands with a ground-shaking thud next to you, hundreds of maggots still clinging to his vermilion scales. So this Abishai, he's reasonable. He can be talked to if the party is not hostile. And it's at this point the party might realize there's a problem. They need to get into that cave entrance, which is at least 1,000 feet away across a devil birthing pit. Well, they can either fly across themselves, or the Abishai can be bribed to fly the party across. However, remember, he's a devil. He's evil and incredibly petty. He will bilk the PCs out of their money if they're not careful. So if they say, take me across the pit and here's a bunch of gold to do it, he'll take them across the pit and fly them right back and put them down, because they didn't say for him to leave them over there. And devils are lawful. Lawful annoying. But even if the party can get across on their own, they still need a pass to not get frog stomped by the Abishai or in Tiamat's lair. Once across the maggot pit, the PCs stand on a narrow ledge in front of the rough-hewn opening in the stone wall. The mouth leads into a 60-foot wide tunnel carved through the rock that comes out into a colossal cavern. Standing in this monstrous hall of solid rock, you feel smaller and more insignificant than you felt in a long time. Light from the sky outside barely reaches down the tunnel, casting a pale red glow over the black stone. You can see 4 other tunnels leading off in different directions. One tunnel leads to the Cave of Greed and the Gate of Dis. The others lead to Tiamat and her 5 dragon consorts, the most powerful male great worms of each chromatic color: red, black, green, blue, and white. Each consort resides in its own cave and revels in its own hoard of treasure. The treasure hasn't been specified. The PC shouldn't muck around with it, but the DM's free to fill the layers with any coins or object desired. Currently, the red and green consorts are not on Beator, and only the black, blue, and white worms rest in their lairs. The guides know better than to disturb Tiamat, her consorts, or their treasures. They want to get their passengers alive to Dis. If the PCs insist on picking a fight with Tiamat or the Great Worms, the DM should give them one chance to surrender and leave. Otherwise, the poor sods are decimated without much fuss. And I feel that's probably realistic. These are mid-level characters. That is the goddess of evil dragonkind and the alphas of each chromatic color. This won't be a contest. This is the lair of the evil goddess of evil dragons. She guards the gateway into the lower layers of the 9 hells. That the PCs even have a chance of getting through peacefully and alive is amazing. So if you don't go with what that blogger I mentioned earlier was talking about, trying to get the players to pick fights in here and seize the legendary treasure hoards that the dragons have, and the PCs stick to the terms of their safe passage into hell, they may be terrified, but safe. Now, if the party is overtaken by greed or stupidity, they get what they deserve. I just want to give you the flavor text of each of these dragon layers because I think they're pretty damn cool. The Red Consort's lair. You feel like you've stepped into the belly of a volcano, or maybe right into the elemental plane of fire. The cavern's clouded with a searing haze that seems to eat away at your exposed skin. All you can see is a shimmeringly hot pile of coins riddled with other stray items. However, it's hard to focus on anything except the boiling sweat burning your eyes and your rapidly rising body temperature. Every round that a PC's in here, they suffer 3 to 6 points of damage. So staying in here is a bad idea. The Black Consort's lair. Here, the very atmosphere seems thick with poison, as sharp, corrosive air burns your lungs, your skin, and your armor. Just before your eyes snap shut at the stinging pain, you make out a large, clear pool in the middle of the cave, and what looks like a sculpted mound of coins resting at the bottom. So, liquid and gaseous acid fills the home of the Black Dragon, and every round spent in the cave, your armor permanently loses 1 class of effectiveness, and magic weapons lose 1+. You also take 2d8 damage from breathing the air, so this is a bad place to be. Don't dare think about going into the pool of clear acid. The Green Consort's lair. The rock in this tunnel softens under your feet, becoming more and more swamp-like as you progress. It leads to a cavern so thick with luxuriant foliage that you can't see more than 10 feet through the growth. The air is as heavy as a wet blanket draped around your head, and the droning buzz of insects seem to get louder and angrier. Every round after the first, hundreds of flying insects attack each PC, stinging and biting through everything but metal armor for D8 damage, and only cold-based attacks will fend them off. This is a bad place to be. The Blue Consort's lair. After winding away from the central cavern, the passage suddenly stops at the edge of a great dark abyss that stretches below you endlessly. In the center of the pit is a mountain peak rising up from the black depths, at least 500 feet from the edge where you stand. Nestled by the peak is a ponderous, deep blue dragon the color of water at the ocean's bottom. It stares balefully at you across the abyss, watching with unblinking, milky eyes. Now, the blue dragon will give the PCs a chance to leave. If they try to cross over to him, he takes to the air, attacks, and gladly slaughters any idiot dumb enough to stick around. If any of the PCs fall into that abyss we talked about, there's a chance that they will die of old age before they hit the bottom. And finally, Tiamat's lair. As the PCs pass this cavern, a terrible aura of fear prevents them from approaching the dark entrance. A freezing wave of fear washes over you, chilling your blood and raising goosebumps the size of gold coins all over your body. With the force of a hurricane, the aura pushes you away from the pitch-black cavern entrance, crushing you against the opposite wall. And the PCs must inch their way along the wall until they pass the entrance to Tiamat's lair and enter the tunnel leading to the Cave of Greed, at which point the aura of fear subsides. Any PC who insists on entering the cave through magical or other extraordinary means faces instant immolation with no saving throw and no chance to back out. Tiamat is a power, and powers can't be disturbed if they don't wish to be. As the party takes the southern branch out of the huge central cavern, the tunnel splits again, leading to the Cave of Greed and the Gates of Dis. If you go to the Cave of Greed, as you make your way down the wide tunnel, you can see huge iron doors set into the rock at the far end. Just to your right, though, another passageway opens into the tunnel, ruddy light spilling through whatever lies on the other end. The ruddy light takes on a more golden glow in this cavern, emanating not from any torch or fire, but from a glittering pile of coins. Enough copper, silver, and gold to ransom a dozen kings. Sword hilts, goblets, tunics, and gems of all sizes and colors add to the mound. The only thing between you and the treasure is an oblong pond of dark, fetid water, about 300 feet across that spans the width of the cavern. So a place called the Cave of Greed isn't a good idea to go into, and especially to try to indulge your greed with the treasure. First off, each visitor to the cave and sees that pile of treasure has to make a wisdom check, and your alignment makes it worse the less good you are. And if you fail that check, you run across that water, determined to get to the other side no matter what anybody does or says. No flight, levitation, or teleportation magic works in the Cave of Greed, so you've got to go through that pond. You're going to be slowed down by your armor, and every round spent in the water saps 1 point of wisdom from the waiter to a minimum of 0, and they don't notice until they emerge on the opposite bank. Now, the loss isn't permanent. The character's wisdom returns at a rate of 1 point every 2 days, but that's probably not a good condition to try to live with. Oh, and if you do get over there, you're going to find that the treasure is real, but it's all ridiculously cursed. Weapons are -3 or worse. Goblets turn any liquid in them to poison. Gems randomly burst into handfuls of spiders, etc. Even the coins bring woe to their taker, as each weighs as much as 100 similar coins, making it difficult at best to transport them away. Greed's bad. I think this entry in the 9 Hells is getting that across. And finally, at the end of the tunnel, the Gate to Dis. The rocky tunnel comes to an end at a set of 20-foot-tall doors of rusty gray iron built into the stone. Each door looks warped with irregular bumps and protrusions as if battered by something on the other side. Bolted halfway between the top and bottom of each door is a large ring handle. So there's trouble in opening doors not made on a human scale for human scale characters. And then there's the infinite darkness of the tunnel leading down once you do get them open. Because hell is bad, there's a terrifying spider ambush you can get for free. Before the party gets hopelessly lost, some fiend was merciful enough to place a magic mouth on a boulder that mocks travelers by saying Dis can only be entered by those who crawl. If the party goes back to the open gates and crawls their way in, they're rewarded by a fresh hell. If they don't think to turn back and crawl in, they'll follow the tunnel through the caverns forever without end. I love this dungeon because it gives the players an opportunity to adventure in the shadows of one of the great terrors of the Dungeons & Dragons game. Tiamat has had entire campaigns written about her. She was the main villain of multiple episodes of a children's cartoon. Planescape was designed for the exploration of the heavens, the hells, and everything in between, and this module is delivering on that promise. And in this case, that promise is searing misery and betrayal in Chapter 4, A City That Burns.